Whoa. When discussing burial, it's helpful to understand that there are two primary types of burial grounds in our country. Both varieties come with their own set of rules and requirements for those buried on site, which we will discuss shortly. For most of us, the term burial has been used to describe interment in what is known as a conventional or traditional cemetery, pictured here. You really can't go far without seeing one. In fact, as of today, there are over 20,000 registered cemeteries in the US. Now on to the other type of burial known as natural or green burial, pictured here. And while many argue natural burial should actually be referred to as traditional burial, the current wave of green burial popularity has been on the rise since the first green burial cemetery, Ramsey Creek Preserve, opened in 1998. These days, cemeteries really do come in all shapes and sizes. It's important to note that while not the norm, there are also some conventional cemeteries establishing natural burial sections in order to offer green burial as an option as it continues to increase in popularity. These spaces are referred to as hybrid cemeteries. For the purpose of this presentation, however, assume we are primarily focusing on cemeteries that only handle natural burials. Okay, so what exactly are these natural burial cemeteries looking for? Natural burial gets its name from the idea that burial should be as simple and environmentally agreeable as possible. That means everything going into the ground, from clothing to the casket or burial shroud, is biodegradable. No concrete burial vaults, metal caskets, or embalming fluid are permitted. Bodies return to the earth in a way that sustains and promotes life. With cemeteries being treated as protected spaces by local and state laws, it only makes sense that land preservation is often at the heart of many of these natural cemeteries. The land in these natural spaces is only gently rather than meticulously maintained. Use of mechanical equipment and herbicides are at a bare minimum. And the heart of the mission is to utilize the land in a respectful manner that benefits all. So why go green? And this slide really just sort of piggybacks on what we just touched on. Going green is a simple return to the earth, feeding the earth to promote new life. Burial in nature provides a peaceful setting for reflection for those who remain, and these spaces also serve as a way to help conserve land in many cases. Much like the term organic, the term green is one to be skeptical of. Here's a quick note on greenwashing. As with anything claiming to be more environmentally friendly, it's important to carefully evaluate natural burial products. Are they made of genuine materials? Are they locally sourced when possible to reduce carbon footprint? Who's making them, and are they being paid and treated fairly? Ultimately, a green burial is only as green as the sum of its parts. And here we have a quick visual representation of how green burial cemetery numbers have increased since 2015. Focus on the green bars in the center, which represent the US only growth rate. Blue is US and Canada, and then red is New England. These numbers include cemeteries that are both exclusively green burial and those that operate as hybrids. Okay, so where can I get one? And this picture has been in my slide deck for a while, but it feels extremely appropriate given the time of year. So now I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to finish out the presentation. He's going to talk a bit more about how we do things at Panorama Natural Burial specifically.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. As she mentioned at the beginning, I'm Ryan. I'm the assistant manager at Panorama Natural Burial, and I'll talk about what we do in particular. So, as we just saw, there are approximately 400 natural burial cemeteries across the U.S. These can either be just sections of a traditional cemetery or cemeteries that are uniquely dedicated to natural burials. And this number continues to grow each year. There are four other natural burial cemeteries in Virginia, which include Duck Run in Harrisonburg, Cool Spring at Holy Cross Abbey in Berryville, Forest Rest in Boone's Mill, and The Meadow in Lexington. Panorama Natural Burial is the first natural burial cemetery in the Charlottesville area and is located in Earlysville. It's just a few minutes away from the Charlottesville airport. So, what exactly is Panorama Farms? Here's a brief history. Jim and Bunny Murray moved to Earlysville from New York in 1952. They settled on an expansive 850-acre parcel of land that they would farm into the 1990s. And then, seeing the writing on the wall for many small family farms, they made a conscious and successful effort to shift the farm from agriculture to community-minded businesses that would serve to protect the land while focusing on sustainability. And the goal was to keep the land open and to invite the community in. And they passed their values down to their sons, who work tirelessly to uphold their parents' legacy. So currently, there are three businesses on Panorama Farms, which you may have heard of already. One is Panorama Pay Dirt, a composting soil company. Another is Panorama Running, which is home to UVA and the Albemarle High School cross country teams. And they actually hosted the NCAA finals last year. And now there is Panorama Natural Burial. And so, although all of the businesses are under the Panorama Farms name, they each operate completely independently, with Natural Burial being located on the opposite side of the property from the other two businesses. So, why choose Panorama? And there are a few things that truly make us stand out among the other green burial cemeteries in Virginia. So, first of all, we know that with death, so many of us need more than a quiet cemetery. In addition to our beautiful natural landscape, we host numerous activities to enrich the lives of those within our community. So, from native plant identification walks to yoga, we are demonstrating that cemeteries can be a place full of life and meaningful connection. And we hope to be a place where positive memories are made. And additionally, Panorama is the only conservation natural burial cemetery in Virginia. And so, regarding conservation, as I mentioned, much of Panorama Natural Burial was left to its own devices since it stopped being used for agriculture in the 90s. And this means that many undesirable invasive plants started to take over, limiting the biodiversity that used to be on the property. But in the last 2 years or so, since we've opened, efforts have been made to remove invasive species from the burial ground and replace them with all kinds of native plants. So there's meadow sections with grasses, a lot of wildflowers and forbs, some shrubs, and some native trees going in as well. Um, Part of our strategy to restore the land is doing delayed mowing and prescribed burns that will help restore the meadow by limiting invasive plant growth and promoting native growth and germination. And we've also installed some bluebird and kestrel boxes to shelter those birds, and we are looking at getting bat boxes in the future. Yep. Next slide, Stephanie.
Here, I can't get it to advance.
Well,
Sorry,
that's
I had
strange.
muted myself. Just give me 1 second. I don't know why it's not moving.
Okay, well, I can talk a little bit more about the
There we
conservation
go.
efforts.
Sorry
Oh,
about
okay.
that. There it is.
All right. Well, and the other interesting thing that we do that other natural burial grounds don't necessarily pursue is we promote the idea that knowledge is power. So we're the only cemetery focusing on education about end of life and death care options. And we never want people to feel pressured into making one of the most important decisions of their lives. And while we think natural burial is the gentlest ending, we want to empower families to investigate their options and make informed choices they are happy with. With this in mind, we teamed up with a couple of other organizations to create this website for Virginia specific end of life information. And on this site, you can find everything from how to work with or avoid working with a funeral home to creating a home funeral and natural burial ceremony. And a quick fun fact, we are also one of only 12 cemeteries in the country to be members of the Conservation Burial Alliance. Membership with the CBA means that our cemetery is dedicated to the conservation of the land in Earlysville and that we pledge to actively educate the community while seeking out new ways to steward the land. And really, this means that we are a step beyond maybe more minimalist natural burial grounds. We are actively pursuing conservation. All right. And that covers it for the sort of introductory part of this presentation. So if anyone has any questions, we can go ahead and start chatting more freely.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing. Perfect. I don't know what happened. I couldn't get the arrow, like the arrow, I don't know if it was sticking, it wasn't moving.
Hmm.
Um, so anybody have any questions?
Um, Don has his hand up. There you go.
Yeah, I have a question about the cat. You said you have biodegradable containers. Can you describe those in more detail?
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't offer anything. We're not permitted by Virginia law to have anything. But people that are buried at Panorama need to be in some type of biodegradable container. And you can get those online or through the funeral home, and we have resources available for that. But what that means is a like a linen shroud with maybe a piece of wood along the person's back for stability, or you can have a bamboo or wicker basket, or just a simple pine box. Just no metal. Yeah.
Audrey, go ahead.
You said something about you didn't need to be involved with funeral homes. Are funeral homes becoming greener, or are you just supposed to do it yourself and get the box off of Amazon and have it sent to you? I mean, I wouldn't know how to do it without a funeral home involved.
Sure. And we are always happy to, if you have a question, even if you're not working with us ultimately, to help you navigate that. Um, you absolutely can get stuff off of Amazon, or locally you can build your own. Um, a lot of the funeral homes also offer a pine box, unfortunately, and the ones that we've dealt with in Charlottesville have been very transparent, and they'll tell you you can get it from us, but it's not going to be the most cost effective. Um, so sometimes it comes down to convenience, but we really just want to encourage people to do a little bit of research before making that purchase directly from the funeral home. You can order something offline and keep it at home if you have space. We actually have one woman whose spouse is buried at our cemetery, and she had a local gentleman make um, her her casket or box, whatever you want to call it, and she's using it as a bookshelf in her living room. So,
Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, can you speak a little bit more about how the graves are marks? Are you able to put markings on the graves, or how does that work again?
sure, Ryan, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So, well, I guess I should ask, do you mean marking the graves pre-burial or post-burial?
Post burial.
Yeah,
So where normally in a regular cemetery you'd see headstones. What do you have there? Just to understand.
yeah. So we do offer headstones ourselves. For aesthetic reasons, we have a specific style that we want, which is a very simple river stone that lies flush with the ground. It will say first and last name, optionally middle, and birth and death year. And the idea there is that when you're out there, your attention should really be grabbed by nature more so than by the headstones themselves. But we do offer those. They're collected right from the Rivanna, probably not even a half mile away from the burial ground. And then we have someone who can inscribe them, who does not do other stonework, so he can have a very quick turnaround. And typically, the headstones are available at the funeral services. Um, and like I said, they lie flush with the ground right in the burial spot.
Uh,
Because we don't have concrete vaults under the ground, we mound the soil up, the excess soil up over the grave. So there's a pretty sizable mound, with the expectation being that that will settle over the following months and years. And then we scatter a mix of native seed and cover crop to stabilize the graves. So that will start regrowing pretty quickly after the burial. And then we also invite families to do plantings of native plants directly on top of those burial mounds. And so when you're out at our cemetery, you pretty quickly get the idea of it's not a traditional cemetery. It doesn't look like a traditional cemetery, but the graves, because of the mounds and the headstones, and often because they have sort of unique plantings on them, it is still pretty obvious where the graves are, and you can recognize that it is a cemetery from that.
And so as part of the upkeep and keeping the grounds, you do, I mean, when the growth starts growing around, do they clear it over the headstones? They keep the headstones clear, or does it just overgrow?
So we make sure the headstones are always visible. We try to clear at least
Okay,
3 inches on every side of the headstones.
okay, all right.
The burial mounds themselves we let grow, though we try to make sure everything that grows on them is native and
Sure.
especially not
Yeah.
invasive.
Okay.
The meadow or the area where the burials are in general, we allow to grow generally, but with active invasive removal. So there's a lot of Japanese stilt grass that we mow down. There's autumn olive that we mow down. And for the meadow writ large, we do a midwinter mow or prescribed burn.
And you mentioned family coming to visit. So family, it's easy for them to, you have a way of for people to find the graves fairly easily and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so we work with a website that has GPS coordinates for every grave. It looks pretty basic when you're out there, but actually everything is computerized and
Okay.
we know exactly where everything is. If someone wants to visit a grave that is maybe a little bit off of a mowed path, we're happy to mow access to it with a couple days' notice. And if someone, maybe doesn't feel comfortable using the website or just wants a little help, we are out there 5 days a week and someone can come show you how to get to a grave if you have trouble finding it.
Great. So Marilyn asked what kind of costs are involved?
That's a good question. So our costs, we only have a few and we're extremely transparent. So this information is on our website. It's in our printed materials as well. We have the space itself. Then we have an opening and closing fee because we work with a construction company on short notice. And then we have the fee for the stone. The stone is optional. Most people do opt for it, I think, because we're used to seeing stones. Occasionally get a family that's like, nope, all natural. I don't want anything, but that's an anomaly. So the spaces range from 4 to 6,000. The opening and closing fee is 1,600 as of right now. We do not collect for anything, the opening and closing or the stone before the time of need, for a couple different reasons. So the only thing that people can pay for in advance is the space itself. So you're welcome to do that in full, or you can do 10% down and then pay over the course of a year with no interest.
Ellen, you have a question?
Actually, my question is the same one that I
Oh.
see Audrey asked in the chat,
Yeah, that's a good question.
which is, can you take us through the process of actual death to what happens to the body? Where does it go? Who deals with it before it goes to Panorama? And et cetera. You start.
You don't want to read the last sentence there?
Yes, something has to happen to the body so it doesn't smell. And then there's also how many people are already buried there.
Right. Okay, so I can answer that really quickly. So we have 26 burials, but we've sold about 170 spaces. So that means people are pre-planning, for the most part. So in terms of the process, it really depends on what works for you individually. You are more than welcome to call a funeral home. They will come to your home any hour, and remove your loved one from the home, take them to the funeral home, clean them up, cool them if you need them to be held there for a few days or something. Dress them, put them in the biodegradable container and help you file a death certificate and bring them to us. So they'll do the whole thing, if you want. And that kind of goes, it goes back to like what Ryan was talking about. So we're really here as a beacon of truth, I think, in our community, to let you know that you can handle that entire process legally on your own. So if somebody dies at the hospital, you are able to pick them up and bring them home. We need 48 hours notice from time of death to a burial. So, I mean, that's pretty quick. You can typically keep somebody at home 2 to 3 days with no issue, with just a little AC or, in some cases, a little bit of dry ice. There's actually something called Techni ice that you can get on Amazon that's more environmentally, sorry, more environmentally friendly than dry ice and safer. But just a little bit goes a long way. You can have a home funeral. You can invite people into your home. You can light candles. You can anoint them with oils. You can really take this process and make it yours. A lot of what I saw in my previous role, we worked directly with individuals to perform cremation. So, I mean, not quite the same, but the same in the sense that people couldn't afford to, didn't want to go to the funeral home, whatever, maybe they had a bad experience. And just hearing from them after the fact how healing they felt being involved was. So we're really here to walk you through whatever makes the most sense for you. So if somebody dies, say at home, the only thing that has to be on file before we can do a burial is the death certificate. You are you're totally able to go to the health department and file that. There's a medical portion that regardless of, whether you're doing this stuff on your own or working with a funeral home, the medical portion is always going to happen. So that might be the medical examiner if there's an accident or if there's something suspicious, or if you're on hospice, one of the hospice nurses might initiate that part. It's really just time of death, cause of death, things like that. The other portion is what the funeral home typically files, and that's just demographic information. So that's going to be name, date of birth, name, date of birth, all of your information or your person's information. It's very easy to get all that stuff written down ahead of time. The problem is if you go to the health department, you have to file it manually and then they put it in the mail. So it's going to go to Richmond and then they have to process it and approve it to make sure there's no reason for an autopsy or anything like that, give the green light, and then we can do the burial. So, I mean, I think we all probably know the mail system can get a little tricky. And so that's the one hang up. I feel like keeping somebody at home is totally doable for 2, 3, 4 days maybe. But when we're talking about 7 to 10 days, most people don't want that. Again, there's no law that says you can't keep somebody at home for 7 to 10 days. I just think it would get really tricky. So what we've seen is, everything from families having the funeral home handle everything to families doing everything but filing the death certificate on their own. And there are a couple of funeral homes that are more than happy just to do that little piece. And I can provide that information if you call or send me an email. I can, talk you through who's doing what and all that. But as far as transportation goes, if you're doing everything on your own, again, you're within your rights to put somebody in your vehicle. They have to arrive to us in a rigid container or, in the organic biodegradable container. We don't come into contact with bodies in any way. But we've had families fly in from out of town and nobody had a suitable vehicle, so they rented a U-Haul, which I get a lot of laughs when I say that, but it was really touching and they did a beautiful job. She was wrapped in a shroud. They had all kinds of flowers with her. It really is what you make it, and we're here to kind of empower people to kind of step back and think like, oh, well, maybe I can do this a little differently than, maybe my family has for years. And I think when somebody dies, we tend to panic and pick up the phone. And we don't like to have these conversations ahead of time. So we put it off until we're faced with the decision. And we really, a lot of times end up making really expensive choices we're not very happy with. So.
We have a question in the chat. What's the capacity or maximum number of burial plots and how many acres is the land you all have?
Yeah, I can take that one. I think, as I mentioned in the slideshow, Panorama Farms total is 850 acres.
Mhm.
And of that, we are licensed for 20 acres by the state, but we haven't even been open for 2 years. And so we're currently using around 3 acres in several different plots, which have sort of different environmental qualities and different angles that they face. So, of those 3 acres that we're using right now, we've surveyed for probably close to 1,000 spaces. And as Stephanie said, we've sold 160 or so. So that gives us maybe 800 spaces that are ready to go right now. But of the 20 acres total, we still have, 17 acres that we can open up, and it's mostly meadow, so there's no impediments to adding additional spaces. So just sort of back of the napkin math, I'd say we could probably fit 1,000 or 10,000 burials if we needed to. That won't happen anytime soon, but we are licensed to do that. But one thing that I don't think we mentioned in the slideshow was that we have an optional recycling policy. And so what happens there is after 75 years, there shouldn't be any remains left in the soil because it's the southern red clay. It's pretty acidic and it's not even bones will last that long in that environment. So everything will biodegrade within a few decades. And then as an option, and there's no price difference if you opt in or choose not to, we can reuse the soil to bury someone else. Um, that being said, if you have a headstone, it's not like we'll throw it away. We will move it to a memorial stone wall, and there will always be a physical record of everyone who was buried there. But it allows us to reuse the soil for new people without having to expand infinitely. So that's our green approach towards that.
So a follow-up question from Alexandra is adding a funeral home type service part of your business plans for the future so that it's a smoother process from death to getting the body to Panorama?
It is a great question, Alexandra. Unfortunately, in Virginia, to be a funeral director, you have to work for a licensed funeral establishment. And to be a licensed funeral establishment, you have to have embalming equipment and a prep room. And there is just no realistic way for us to do that. So um, I think Florida at one point had kind of a minimal service for like direct cremation and direct burial, and it was called like disposition professionals. And I was looking into that recently, and I was like, oh, it'd be so great if Virginia offered it, but I don't think that's. I actually I'm not even sure if they still allow that in Florida because I think that made some people pretty angry. Because the service was so quick and inexpensive. I think they started like over regulating it to where those prices had to go up, and then it kind of didn't really make any sense to go to that over a funeral home. So I wish, but we'll keep looking for options to make it easier for sure.
And there's another question in the chat about family plots. You want to read that one?
Sure. I'm used to family plots where a family member bought a site that would hold, for example, 8 people or 4 people or 2 people. Do people purchase an area for a family group where people would be buried together? Yes. I guess most commonly we have spouses coming together and they get 2 spots, but we have definitely had a handful of families purchase for, I've got one family that has 10 spaces. So that's absolutely allowed.
Any other questions? So you've answered all our questions. Oops, John, go ahead.
I was trying to write it in. I don't know why it didn't seem to take, but I wanted to ask, I mean, if somebody wanted to be embalmed, would you accept them into your cemetery?
Unfortunately, we can't. I try not to talk about this too much because I don't want to encourage it. So there is one embalming fluid company, Champion. They have what the Green Burial Council has approved as a green embalming fluid. Um, if there are extenuating circumstances, and we have dealt with one case like this where there was a death and the pastor was overseas and they had to hold off on doing the burial, and they wanted a church service and a few different things. So we did allow for that. The green embalming chemicals are certainly more environmentally friendly, but definitely not great for the soil. So
Right.
we just don't want to encourage people to use that type of thing. So I think in a pinch, absolutely, but not with traditional embalming fluid.
Right. I think it's important for everybody to, I'm sure everybody who's in on this conference program understands that embalming fluids are very toxic, and that actually cremations also create a lot of air pollution, and so there's some real problems with it. I'm thinking of a green burial, but I was planning on doing it on my own property. Do you see that Albemarle, now the state doesn't seem to have any problem with it. I've checked their website. Do you know if Albemarle County has any special regulations?
It's really funny. I haven't found any concrete evidence that anybody really has a problem with it.
Okay,
I think that's
good.
great. I will say I've had issues. One family was looking for information about Charlottesville. I know you really have to have a decent amount of land to do it in Charlottesville, and I think very few people do. But the family I'm working with has a ton of land, and I have been ping-ponged back and forth between the health department and zoning like an infinite number of times. You wouldn't believe it. And nobody can answer my questions. So actually, like I feel like it's like a bury first, ask forgiveness later situation. But
Yeah,
yeah, the further out you go, I think the less regulated it is.
right. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I
And
see another question where it says, what about pets? Do you offer burial plots for pets?
That's something that we're working towards. In Virginia, you can't have pets in the same sections as humans. They have to be in their own section. So we do get that question fairly regularly, that we've started looking into what that would look like, but we're not quite there yet. So once the body gets to you, you dig the hole and place the body/box in it and cover it up, right? Yes. Yeah, so it depends on what the family wants. Most of our services have involved the family being there for that. So, and family is invited to participate in any way that they'd like or not. Um, your question is almost if the family was almost like maybe not involved very much. Yeah, we could definitely do it that way. Typically, families or funeral home will bring the person. The family may arrive. We get there about 2 hours early to decorate. So Ryan has this really beautiful cut flower garden where we always have seasonal flowers available. So what we'll do is after the hole is dug, we'll arrive early and prepare the space. So by adding flowers and different greenery from around the burial ground, and family is more than welcome to come participate in that. Once the body arrives, we have this really beautiful processional cart that we use in all the services to get the person from the roadside to the gravesite. We ask for 4 to 6 able-bodied individuals, if possible, from the family to act kind of as pallbearers to help us move the cart, lift the person off the cart, place them over the gravesite. Whatever service is going to happen can take place at that point, which, like I said, can be anything from, we can have music or prayer or whatever, or nothing. Some families say a couple things and then it's very quick. But whenever everybody's in agreement that we're ready, we'll go ahead and lower the person into the grave. family is welcome to grab a shovel and put a little dirt in the grave. Some families fill the entire grave to where it's level, and then other families just want to do a little bit of drop a little bit of soil in kind of symbolically. It's in no way forced manual labor, but yeah, ultimately that is what happens, and it can be as involved, obviously, or not, as you like. Next question is, will you be talking about the pollution involved with cremation and or embalming? If you don't want your, oh, okay. Yeah, we can talk a little bit about that. I managed a crematory up in New England for, well, Donna, I think you were talking about this with my little intro there, for 5 or so years. And so cremation, I think what we know the most about, and when we talk about cremation, is the pollution from the actual cremation process. So there's a lot of carbon emissions. But then actually after the process, what you're getting back, we call ashes or bones ashes, right? But it's bone that you're getting back. And the bone you're getting back is not the same as the bones in our body right now. The composition is different. So what you're getting back is something that's much higher pH. And if you put cremated remains directly into the soil, kind of as is, it makes it really difficult for the organisms to thrive and for plant life to take root again. So it's kind of a double whammy with cremation when it comes to just not being the best option for the environment. Embalming, I mean, that's just, and I'm sure there are lots of scientific facts about what is in there. I just know it's terrible for the environment because it's ultimately chemicals. Just you're replacing the bodily fluids with pretty harsh chemicals. The next question was, if you don't want your plot recycled in 75 years, does it have to be? No, absolutely not. That is totally up to you. There's no reduction in cost. The cost is the same. And the reason for that was when we first opened up, I really wasn't sure how it was going to go over. Over in Europe, I think they've been dealing with space issues for a long time and they've been really creative, and that's just not something we've done here. So I didn't want people to be totally turned off by saying, oh, you have to do this. And I didn't want to offer it as like, oh, recycle and you get a discount, because I didn't want people to be financially motivated to do it. So it has been really promising. I'd say about 85% of our sales, people just opt in to recycle.
Great. We like recycling. Any last questions? This has been really enlightening.
Stephanie, can you said that pets can't be buried in the same place as humans. Can you do opposite sides, or is that a federal law or state law or something? They just can't be in the same area, same, what are the rules about it?
Yeah, it's a Virginia specific, it's state specific. Some states you can have pets and people in the same area, but unfortunately in Virginia, they have to have their own designated section. They can have a section within a section. So we have a wooded area and then we have a meadow. So if we wanted to do 2 separate pet sections in those sections, we could, but they just have to be separate and there has to be a very clear designation. So like signage that says this is the pet section. I really wish it wasn't that way. And I hope it changes. I just think it would be so special to be able to be buried with your pet. But unfortunately, Virginia doesn't permit it right now.
Would you consider doing a pet section? Is that in the plans?
Oh Yeah, absolutely. It's something that we're working on right now. We're doing the background research, and I know there's really nothing in our area. I think it would be really lovely. So it is something that I'm actively looking into as we speak.
Let me, I don't want to hog the floor, but I'm good at that. When you talk about the cremation remains being the pH is such that plants won't grow, when you go and sprinkle someone's ashes over a lawn or in the woods or something, is that it's not concentrated, so it's not going to be such a big deal as so plants won't grow there, or is it only when it's like concentrated and you dig a hole and put them in that it's going to impact what can grow over it?
So I actually am not sure how I would have answered this about a week ago, but I did just see somebody had there's a company that has designed a soil amendment called Let Your Love Grow. And they had posted this photo of somebody who had made a heart when they sprinkled cremated remains, and the grass was all dead. So I probably would have answered it differently had I not seen that and said, oh, it's probably not as big of a deal because it's not as concentrated. I imagine to make the heart, they probably did have them pretty concentrated. I think if you were to like
Okay.
sprinkle them into the wind, it's probably not an issue, but um, as far as how concentrated, I'm not exactly sure, but
Hmm. This has been fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, very good.
you. Well, if you guys ever have any questions, feel free to call. We're always around and we'd love to host you all out at the farm. I started this presentation saying the information is great, but it really just doesn't do the space justice. It's a gorgeous piece of property, and as Ryan was saying, we have all kinds of educational activities and fun things out on the farm to get people connected and hopefully help people realize that a cemetery doesn't just have to be a place to be reflective and solemn, that we can find joy there too.
Yeah,
So
and I would just add that what's impressed me about this cemetery is that every time you visit, it looks different because it is so focused on nature. And a traditional cemetery you go to, and it looks sort of the same every single time because they mow it regularly and everything is manicured. But out here, every month you visit, different things are in bloom, different birds are migrating through, different butterflies are there. And so it's a very cool environment to be in where it's a cemetery, but it's also a park, and you get to see really fascinating new natural things every time you're out there. And I would encourage everyone to come check it out.
Do
And
you all do marketing stuff so people know about you? Like, do you have presentations to take to hospice or some of the churches, or is it all just kind of word of mouth right now?
we're out and about for sure. We've done this presentation a handful of times, a handful of different ways. And we have a little bit of light marketing out with like BPM. Um, it's tricky because unfortunately, this industry has a pretty um, negative reputation, and we don't ever want people to feel like we're really trying to get your business, which I mean, it's a business. So of course, we're hoping people will come
Right.
out, but yeah, I would say most of what we hear is, oh, I heard about you from a friend, or I was at a funeral, and I really like that. Um, I'm hoping over time people just are a little bit more tuned in and spreading the word. But yeah, it's definitely a work in progress. We're at the center quite a bit. And yeah, we've done a little bit of traveling around, but anytime anybody wants a presentation, we're more than happy to accommodate and go somewhere. So
Great.
well, thanks. And I'd recommend if you're looking at their website too, it's got lots of gorgeous pictures so you can get a little flavor for what it's like when you actually go out there. So check that out.
Especially if you come out this time of year, because everything is very crispy and brown.
Yeah. So I want to thank you so much for doing this. And wow, I've never seen this many questions at the end of a presentation. So this is really great. It's a sign of how interesting this whole topic is, and we're so glad that you did that. So thank you so much, and thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
It
Yeah.
was
Thank
wonderful.
you. That's good.
Hi, Rebecca.
Bye.
All right. Well, thank you, and good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good
Bye.
night.
All right. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Night.